Good afternoon and welcome to the Brazos-April Authority's Brown Bag on the Brazos. I'm Judy Pierce, Public Information Officer for the BRA and your host for today's virtual town hall meeting. I'm pleased to tell you that we'll be hearing from BRA General Manager CEO David Collinsworth today, who will be talking about the ongoing efforts to bring more water to supply the central Brazos River Basin. We're also going to hear from Brad Burnett, our Central and Lower Basin Regional Manager, who will discuss the expansion of the East Williamson County Regional Raw Water System, an effort to ensure water supply is accessible throughout the Central Basin. And then we'll hear from Aaron Abel, our Water Services Manager, who will fill us in on the latest drought conditions and the areas of the basin seeing the least amount of rainfall. And then, as always, we'll answer your questions at the end of our presentation. So before we jump in, let's do a little housekeeping. Part of the purpose of our being here today is to allow you to ask questions of the BRA. So at any time during our presentation today, you can ask a question by typing it into the chat function, and you will find that icon in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And if we don't get to your question today, you can certainly send us an email at information@brazos.org, and we'll respond to you in writing. Before we jump into our main topic today, I'd like to tell you about an upcoming event at Lake Granbury. The BRA will be hosting its 6th annual Water Safety Awareness Day at the lake on May the 4th this year. Some of you may ring a bell there out for the Star Wars fans out there. It's a great family event. We'll have first responders on hand for the kids to see the fire trucks and police vehicles up close. And then we'll also have a kid fishing tournament with prizes giving away on the hour. But the best part is that the BRA will be giving away more than 300 kids' life jackets. Better yet, BRA staff will be there to help fit the life jackets on each child to make sure that they are a perfect fit for this summer. So I'd like to invite everyone to come on out in Hood County and enjoy the morning with a free hot dog and get a free life jacket while supplies last. So with that said, let's jump into our topic for today. You've probably noticed that there seems to be a large influx of people moving into Texas in the past few years. In fact, the U.S. Census Bureau announced that the fastest growing state in the union is Texas in 2023. This growth can be seen throughout the state, especially in the DFW area, Houston, and of course the Austin area. And if you've driven anywhere between Waco and Austin, you've seen the growth for yourself in Williamson County. And it's this area, the Central Brazos River Basin, that we'd like to discuss today. So it's my pleasure to introduce Brazos River Authority's General Manager and Chief Executive Officer, David Collinsworth.
Thank you very much, Judy. At no other time in my 30 years of being at this organization have we been more busy. And our focus so much right now is on meeting the demand of growth, both from the function of trying to develop new water, and also protect and manage and expand the resources that we have and the infrastructure that we have so that we can, just like you said, we can provide more water. Now, today's focus is on Williamson County, but on a daily basis, this organization is working on developing water supplies and managing our water supplies as efficiently as we can all up and down the basin. We're seeing growth in so many more counties than we've ever witnessed, we ever imagined that we would see. It's around our reservoirs. As you pointed out, it's moving out of Houston to the north and to the west. And obviously this I-35 corridor is just a continued nonstop growth challenge. We're working on, we're working on ways of developing and creating water for Bell County, potentially Williamson County, McLennan County, just all up and down the basin. Really, this vision started back in the late 1990s when the Brazos River Authority and many of its customers started looking at developing a pipeline to connect our reservoirs. Pipelines connecting reservoirs can be controversial. However, they are simply tools that allow the BRA to manage our resource more efficiently and squeeze every drop out of the lemon, if you will. We began building the pipeline, in the early 2000s. You can see it there on the map. It's the long yellow line that runs parallel to I-35. And that allows us to, again, manage our reservoirs more efficiently. About the time that pipeline was completed, we also began to understand that growth was going to leave the I-35 corridor and begin heading east into Williamson County. And at that time is when we began working on the strategy of purchasing the City of Taylor's water treatment plant and expanding that plant and making it a large-scale regional water provider. And that had a lot of implications. It allowed for us to have more water in Lake Granger, to share the water, if you will, amongst our customers, and promote growth in some very rural areas throughout Williamson County. And Brad's going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Our focus right now is on really two things at the organization. It's on maintaining our dams and our infrastructure so that the water that we have is reliable and dependable for many, many years. And it's also in developing new water supplies. If you sit in on many BRA board meetings and public meetings, you'll hear us talk about Allens Creek, you'll hear us talk about Whitney Water, and we're talking about projects that are 5, 10, 15 years in the works to make that water available. But that's our focus, and making sure that we can provide every drop of water that we can to the I-35 corridor, to the growth that's coming out of the Fort Worth regional area, and then also moving out of Houston and just throughout our basin. So our focus is on developing that water. It's on protecting our infrastructure, maintaining our infrastructure. Our newest dam right now is almost 50 years old. So there's a lot of work that has to be done to take care of those assets. And now we're going to focus in a little bit more on one of those assets and how we're expanding that asset to make sure that in the near term, as Williamson County continues to grow, there's water available for people to drink and use. So I'll turn it over at this time to Brad Burnett. He's our Central and Lower Basin Regional Manager, and he'll talk about our expansion activities going on at our East Williamson County plant.
Yeah, thank you, David. Good afternoon, everybody. See if I can get the slides going here. So I'm gonna zoom in on East Williamson County and talk a little bit about the plant there, like David said. And so to start off, some of you may not be familiar with the area. So what we're looking at here is basically all the components, or most of the components, of what we call our East Williamson County water system. You'll see up here at the top right of this graphic, there's the upper end of Lake Granger, and this is our water treatment plant right here in the blue box. We've got an intake structure down closer to the dam on Lake Granger that brings water in from the lake to the treatment plant here. And then we've got a green line that takes the treated water once it's treated at the plant and runs about 3.5 miles to the community of Circleville, where the 3 customers that we supply there take ownership or possession of the water. And the customers that we supply from this system are currently the City of Taylor, the Lone Star Regional Water Authority, and the Jonah Special Utility District. We purchased the plant from the City of Taylor back around 2004. And at that time, it was about a 5 million gallon per day plant. And this slide here just shows some of the major things that we've done over the last 20 years or so at the plant. We immediately began expanding it after we purchased it from the city and expanded it up to 13 million gallons per day in about 2006. We then shortly after contracted with the Jonah Special Utility District and added them as a customer to the system. Not long after that, around 2015, we added the Lone Star Regional Water Authority as a customer. About that same time, we put in a new intake structure and new pumps at that structure to replace the previous intake structure that was not in an ideal location on the lake. Around 2020, we drilled a well on our property there with the idea someday beginning to blend some of the Trinity groundwater with the Lake Granger surface water, and or doing aquifer storage and recovery at some point in the future, where we might actually use that well to inject treated water from the lake into the ground for storage and use later on. After Winter Storm Uri in 2021, I believe, we added some generators for additional backup power and redundancy there. We lost power at the plant for about 48 hours in Winter Storm Uri and created a lot of problems. And so we learned from that and added quite a few backup generators, and those proved to be valuable. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And then we've also purchased some redundancy type equipment so that if we have any issues with the treated water line, we've got pipes and fittings and valves and things that we could quickly get it repaired and hopefully avoid any water shortages. And here most recently, we purchased some additional property that is going to give us more room to grow and expand as we need to in the future. This is just a quick visual. You can see what the facility looked like in 2005, or this is shortly after we purchased it in 2004. And then on the right is what it looked like last year. And so you can see a lot of the components there that have been added. And then the area in red, it shows as a proposed land acquisition of approximately 28 acres. We actually closed on that property in December of last year. And so that is actually part of the facility now, and will become more room for us to expand as we move forward into the future. This is just an aerial picture. It's kind of neat of the facility, and it shows some of the infrastructure that we added in the expansion in 2006. All the vessels, the 3 large vessels there that you see kind of in the center, were added as a part of that expansion. And also the reservoir up here, see if I get my cursor to work, up here, this is our terminal storage reservoir. And so this was added as a part of that expansion as well. And the value of that storage reservoir is it holds 20 million gallons of water. And so whenever it's full, like this time of year right now, that's 3 or 4 days worth of water for all of our customers. And so in the event we had an issue with the intake structure or pumps there, we keep this terminal storage reservoir topped off as much as we can. And depending on the time of year, it provides anywhere from 2 to, maybe as many as 4 or 5 days worth of water on site there at the facility. These are just a few before and after pictures. This one is of the intake structure. And so the pictures that you see on the left side of the screen are what the intake structure originally looked like. I mentioned earlier that it was on an upper end of the lake, and it was vulnerable to both low water levels during drought, and it was vulnerable to high flows during floods. And this photograph right here actually shows part of the structure that was damaged by a large flood event not long after we bought the plant. And then these photographs down here are some emergency piping that we put in place to continue to supply water after that structure was damaged. So after that, looking at the right, we added the new intake structure and got that online pretty close to 10 years ago now, I think. And it's in a much better location of the lake in terms of being protected from drought and floods, and provides us access to deep water. I mentioned the Trinity well that we added as well. This is just some pictures of that well and the infrastructure there, the drilling of the well on the left, and then kind of what the completed well looks like on the right. And again, we hope to begin blending a little bit of that water with treated surface water to help increase the supply to the area in the next couple of years, and potentially use it for aquifer storage and recovery in the future. These are the generators I mentioned. We added 4 of these after Winter Storm Uri. We have different components of the plant, and so it's a little more complicated than just going and buying one generator and plugging it in. And so our electricians and our operations and maintenance crew worked hand in hand together to come up with what we needed out there, and we got it installed. And when we had the ice storm in February of 2023, these generators proved to be very valuable. We were actually without stable power for about 5 days, and we ran the entire system up to the full capacity that we needed on these generators, and never missed a lick, so to speak. We were able to continue supplying all the water that the customers needed, and so we were very happy and proud of the decision to go ahead and get those things in place. So they were needed more quickly than we hoped, but now that we've got them there, they'll be there when we need them. Slope stabilization project. This is, again, a picture of the intake structure. You see over here on the right, this is the new intake structure I showed you just a moment ago. And over here on the left, you see some pictures of erosion. We had a lot of wet weather from about 2015 through 2020 out at the lake. And at Lake Granger, it's a flood control reservoir. And so when we have wet weather, the lake level rises up into the flood pool, and the Corps of Engineers stores that water there until it's safe to release it downstream. And the consequence of that for us, it was just kind of bad luck in the timing of our intake structure, was that 2015 to 2020 period, we had a lot of high water where the lake stayed above normal for long periods of time. And we also had a lot of north wind. And when you have a lot of north wind, it rolls waves into this point, or this peninsula that the structure is on. And so it was creating this erosion much more quickly than anyone had anticipated. And so last year we went in and installed a protective solution to that. And on the bottom portion here, you see it's what's called a Fabriform concrete mattress. And then on the upper portion of the slope, that's a shotcrete wall. And so we got that done very quickly last year, and are hoping that that'll protect the structure for many, many years to come. Just in terms of the water that we provide to the customers out there, Jonah Special Utility District and the City of Taylor both use 40-45% of the water. And then you see that's been pretty constant in terms of their percent use over the last 4 or 5 years. The Lone Star Regional Water Authority has been growing, and that's likely to continue. They are serving a lot of the area up I-35 and the Gerald area, Sonterra up through there. And as some of you in that area know, that it's rapidly growing. And so this just kind of gives you an idea of who's using the water and how much. This graphic here is looking at the peak amount of water that we flowed out of the plant over the last 10 years or so. And so when we build a water plant, we have to size it to meet that hottest, driest day in August. And on that hottest, dry day in August or July or whenever it occurs, we may use twice as much water that day as we use most days, but that's what the plant's got to be sized for. And so what you're seeing here historically is what our peak water demands were each year in the plant, going back to about 2015 maybe. And if you looked all the way back, if we had this back to 2004 when we bought the plant, you would see not much change from 2004 all the way up here until we're getting close to 2020. And again, as many of you know out there, with the growth in the area and the new Samsung facility, we've started to see a rapid increase in the water needs, and the projection moving forward, that's what the green line is all the way out to 27. That's our best estimate of water needs from the facility. Shows the work that we've got to do in expanding the plant and being able to provide more water. Where we sit today, we're going to be able to provide about 14 million gallons per day this summer. And so that should be adequate for the next year or two. And then I'll talk a little bit more about some of the things we've got going to add some capacity further out into the future so that we can keep up with that green line. This graph here shows water use from a different perspective. This is the average daily use from the plant from 2015 up through 2023 and then projected out to 2070. And I mentioned earlier that the peak day demand is that maximum amount that we have to get from the plant in the worst day of the year. Most days it's much less than that. And so this is what the average flow is out of the plant. So you can see currently we're in about the 6 to 7 million gallon per day range. And that's projected to go up to maybe 11 million by 2030 and so forth. And the blue line up here shows the reliable amount of water that we have in Lake Granger. So from a water supply standpoint, we've got enough water in the reservoir to get us out to about 2040. And the plans and projects that we have going on with blending a little bit of groundwater and the aquifer storage and recovery will take us out beyond 2040, further out into the future in terms of the raw water supply. So we're working both the raw water supply side as well as the treatment side. And I think I'm getting close to the end here. This is the expansion roadmap. Again, right now we're around 13 MGD. We've just got through re-rating the plant. It's a TCEQ process that we've gone through to basically get more capacity out of the existing infrastructure, and that actually went better than expected. And so we're hoping that this 13.75 MGD number will actually be closer to 14 or a little above. We've got that submitted to TCEQ, and we hope to get an approval on that here in the next couple of months. 2025, 2026, we'll be incorporating some water from that Trinity well that I showed you. We've got an engineering design project underway right now for some infrastructure that we're going to need to do that, primarily a cooling tower and some chemical treatment and some internal plumbing, if you will, there at the plant. Next on the list, we've got engineering design going on for an expansion of our treated water line, that line that I showed you on the first slide that runs from the plant to Circleville. And so once we get that pipeline, or until we get that pipeline, or once we get that pipeline expansion in place, that'll get us up to where we've got more pipeline capacity. We'll be able to use a little bit more groundwater, and that'll get us up to about 18 million by 2027. And then also the last thing that we have going on right now is engineering design on a short-term expansion of the plant itself. We're going to be expanding the surface water treatment capacity up to another 10 MGD. And so if you're keeping track of the total, that gets us up to about 28 million gallons a day that we'll have online by about 2028. And again, that's going to help us keep up with that green line I showed you a while ago. In long term, we're looking at ultimate expansion of the treatment, the surface water components of the facility up to the 40 to 42 million gallon per day range. And, the completion date of that will be dependent on the growth that we actually see over the next 10 to 15 years. We'll be watching that and adjusting as we need to for expansion in the future. I think that's it for my part. And so I'll turn it over to Aaron Abel. I believe he's going to talk to you about drought conditions and water supply.
Thank you, Brad. As far as water supply status, today we'll touch on several topics surrounding the system. We'll provide an overall picture of the status of the system. We'll also discuss the precipitation that we've received, both on the short term and long term. And we'll also talk a little bit about focusing on the Little River watershed. As Brad and David mentioned, there's a lot of growth in that area, and we have reservoirs. The Corps has reservoirs that supply water to a number of those communities and counties in that part of the basin. And that's where we have the most drought impacts at this time. And then finally, we'll go ahead and close on both a short-term and a longer-term outlook on what precipitation looks like over the next several months. So this is a graphic that we typically show on the brown bags as far as our water supply status. So the BRA water supply system is composed of 11 reservoirs, 3 reservoirs, Possum Kingdom, Lake Granbury, and Lake Limestone, that are owned by BRA and operated by BRA. We have water rights in those reservoirs, and we also have storage contracts in 8 other core reservoirs. So Brad mentioned the multi-use reservoirs of the Corps that both operate flood control and then also water conservation or conservation pool. And that's what the amount of water that BRA stores, through the Corps of Engineers. The height of these columns represent the relative storage across all the reservoirs. So each column is a reservoir location. The far left side of your screen is the most upstream reservoir, and that's Possum Kingdom. And then you see the Texas Gulf Coast down around Freeport to the right. So looking from upstream to downstream. The blue is the full storage. So that's the water that is currently stored in the reservoirs. And then the white space in those columns are the empty storage. So the first thing that you'll see is 7 of the 11 reservoirs are effectively full. And then we have 4 other reservoirs, and we'll talk a bit about that later in the Little River system, that are not full and are still under drought conditions. We also have the drought contingency plan stages in the lower right-hand corner. So obviously Lake Proctor's in stage 4 pro rata curtailment condition, which is a 30% reduction in use. And then we have Lake Belton, the Stillhouse Hollow, and Georgetown subsystem, all 3 in stage 2 drought warning, and that's a 10% reduction in water use. The table in the upper right depicts the percent full of each reservoir, and we also have a 2-week percent change. So you can see some pluses and minuses up there, and those minuses are due to the Corps of Engineers releasing water from the flood control pools of those reservoirs. We have the drawdown and then the 2-week change in drawdown as well. Whoops. So one question that I know is out there is, how has the basin been faring in terms of rainfall, both on a short and long term? And we're going to go through a couple of maps that depict the departure from normal precipitation as it relates to rainfall across the basin. So this is a map depicting the 2-month departure from normal precipitation generated from the National Weather Service. And I'll give you an example. For example, the 30-year normal rainfall for Lake Stillhouse Hollow Dam for February and March is about 5.5 inches. This year, that precipitation gauge at the dam received about 4.1 inches. So it's about 4.1 inches less rain than what we normally get between February and the end of March. And so that's how this map is depicted, and it's generated by the National Weather Service and updated essentially daily. So the yellows that you'll see are areas that are below normal rainfall for the last 2 months. You'll see the central part of the basin ranging from 1 to possibly 4 inches below normal. So that's less rain that what we typically get in those months. And then you'll see some pockets of above normal precipitation. And those are the greens that are primarily in the upper basin above Lakes Whitney, Aquila, and then over towards Lake Granbury, and then a little bit further west towards Erath County. So, as you can see, we also have some above normal precipitation in the lower part of the basin as well. But more or less, a lot of the basin is either normal, above normal, with some below normal in that central part of the basin, at least over the last 2 months. Going back a little bit further, you can develop the same data that National Weather Service provides for the last 6 months. So this is dating back to October 1st of 2023. And the first thing that you'll see is, wow, most of the basin is either gray, which is normal. We've received the normal precipitation over that time, or we've seen these blues and purples and greens, which is above normal. And oddly enough, the latter part of October, some may remember that we had extremely large or high rainfall amounts, particularly in the Brazos above Lake Whitney and in the Bosque River watershed that flows into Lake Waco. And then parts of that also, that rain event also fell in the Leon River watershed that feeds Lake Belton and parts of Lake Stillhouse Hollow and the Lampasas River watershed. So, over the last 6 months, more or less, we've been doing well. And we'll talk a little bit more later about the lake level impacts and storage impacts that we've seen as well. Zooming in to really look at the Little River watershed, because that's where we've had, the most severe drought impacts, at least, dating back to, the summer of 2021. We wanted to look at the Little River watershed. So the Little River watershed is composed of multiple tributaries: the Leon River, the Lampasas River, and the San Gabriel River. All of those rivers flow into other reservoirs, primarily the Corps of Engineer reservoirs of Lake Proctor in the Upper Leon River watershed, Lake Belton, which is further downstream along the Leon, Lake Stillhouse Hollow that is fed by the Lampasas River, and then Lake Georgetown, which is fed by the San Gabriel River, and then Granger is located further downstream. So this is the same map, a 60-day departure from normal. And you can see, obviously, along the I-35 corridor, we've seen less rain than normal over the last 2 months, typically up to, potentially 4 inches or more less rain. And then again, this is the water year to date, so dating back to October 1st of 2023, focusing on the Little River watershed. And you can see that October event, and then also in January, we had some rainfall as well that was provided above normal rainfall in parts of the basin. And you'll see that, really above Lake Belton and around Lake Proctor, as well as immediately around Lake Stillhouse Hollow, saw above normal rainfall over these last 6 months. A lot of folks will say, well, how have the reservoirs fared? And we've seen some improvements for sure in this part of the basin. This is a graphic that actually compares reservoir capacities and lake levels between October 25th of 2023 and then just a week ago, late March of 2024. So this is kind of similar to what we show in the system status, but I want to point out the red line in each of these reservoirs. So that is the storage level as of October 25th of 2023. The full storage is as of March 27th of 2024. So you can see the relative change in storage level for each of the reservoirs in the Little River Basin. And that's, due to the rainfall that we've received in this part of the basin and a little bit of runoff, obviously. The data in the upper left hand shows the percent change in percent full between those two dates. And so you'll see, Lake Proctor has increased about 6% with a lake level change of about 1.7 feet between those two dates over the last, roughly 5 months. Belton at 16% and up almost 8 feet. Stillhouse Hollow, 5% and up a little bit less than 3 feet. And then Georgetown had a much greater rise. Part of that is due to our transfer of water from Lake Stillhouse Hollow to Georgetown through the Williamson County Regional Raw Water Line. And then also Lake Granger, oddly enough, is full and just over 30 or 40 miles away from Georgetown and Stillhouse Hollow. You can have this big a difference between reservoir statuses. And that's because we're in a big basin. Texas is big, the Brazos River Basin is big, and we can have different conditions and at the same time. Looking at the total system, basically zooming back out and comparing between the October 25th storage and where we are now, you can see that the system total has increased from 69% up to 86% full over these 5 months. And that's about 300,000 acre feet of water that has flowed into the reservoirs. The releases that we've had between the core reservoirs and the BRA reservoirs, since the reservoirs have been full, and the ones that I'm talking about are the 7 that are full, have been released a volume of about 400,000 acre feet. That's water that had to be released, whether it was being impounded by the flood control pool in the core reservoirs, or it was being passed downstream in the BRA water supply reservoirs that don't have flood control pools. So we've seen some benefits, some significant benefits across the basin, but we still definitely need some more rain, particularly in the Little River system. This is a short-term precipitation outlook that is disseminated by the National Weather Service as of yesterday. Both the 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook and the 8 to 14 day outlook. And you'll see the different colors. The greens represent the probability for above normal rainfall over the 6 to 10 day period, and then the 8 to 14 day period. And then the tans represent below normal rainfall. So most of Texas over the next 6 to 10 days, we're supposed to see above normal rainfall, and that is due to a system coming in mainly next week. And I know a lot of folks are interested in the eclipse, and right now it looks like it's probably going to be cloudy, but we'll have to see. But we definitely need some rain, continued rain in the basin. From a longer term perspective, the National Weather Service issued a precipitation outlook for April, and this is a marked change over the last couple of weeks when the last update came out. But we're supposed to see above normal rainfall throughout April, according to the National Weather Service. And then going a step further, the seasonal drought outlook that was released at the end of March shows the seasonal outlook of the tendency of drought formation or drought removal. And the good news is, at least now, they're indicating that we would see potential drought removal likely in parts of the basin, or at least improvement. So, this is looking out from April 1st through the end of June. So this is good news. We'll have to continue to follow, but we're entering spring, and this is where we get most of the rain in this part of Texas. So hopefully we'll see additional rainfall over the next several months.
Thank you very much, Aaron. We appreciate it. Brad as well. I'm seeing that we don't have any questions here, but I actually do have a question that I wanted to pose to Aaron. We've had a number of people call in recently and on our social media platforms asking, hey, what's the deal with Possum Kingdom Lake? It looks like you're full. Are you going to release any water? And of course, the concern always is that, being an older dam, we need to open one of the large gates. And so people want to be prepared if we're going to do that. So what's it looking like, Aaron?
Well, so you're correct. I mean, Possum Kingdom is about an inch below the elevation 999, which that's elevation of the operational full level of Possum Kingdom. So it's effectively full. And this is a great picture to show the different options that BRA has to release water once we get full. And so the likelihood of having to increase the release at Possum Kingdom is starting to increase because the reservoir is full, and we are expecting to see rainfall. So we have three ways to release water from Possum Kingdom Lake and Morris Shepherd Dam. And so this graphic, you can see the lower, what we call the controlled outlet conduit is in that building, right there. And that is the outlet that we use to supply customers downstream for water supply, but we also can use it at the front end of flood events and at the tail end of flood events to pass water. And it only uses or only releases about 2,500 to 3,000 cubic feet per second. So that is one way that we can release water. The second way is what you typically see, and that's the low flow gates. And there's 3 low flow gates at Possum Kingdom that Judy's highlighting now. And that typically releases on the order of 50 CFS all the way up to 350 or so CFS. So we can release a combination between the controlled outlet and the low flow gates to come up with, about 3,000 CFS. When we have larger flood events, we do have to open the bear trap gates, and those are the gates up at the top, and we have to manage the lake level to ensure that the lake level doesn't rise above the top of the gates, because we can't do that, and because that would create a situation where we couldn't open gates. So we will be looking at rainfall, the inflows into the reservoir, and to determine how to release water out of Possum Kingdom. So the likelihood is we are probably going to have to increase the release. It all depends on the amount of rainfall, where that falls, the duration, and the magnitude. The watershed above Possum Kingdom is very large. So rainfall, even in the Abilene area, can impact inflows and cause us to have to release water. So I'm sorry I don't have more definitive plans, but right now we don't have any definitive plans to open a gate at Possum Kingdom, but we'll be watching the weather.
Well, again, thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us for this brown bag on the Brazos. We will be having another one at the end of May after our next board meeting. And in the meantime, if you have questions, again, you can always ask us at sending an email to information@brazos.org. And we look forward to seeing you the next time. Thank you again for joining us.